everybody. Before we start the meeting, I wanted to read a quick statement. Before we begin, we would like to take a moment and remember Stephanie Frederick, special paraprofessional at G. Stanley Hall, who recently passed away. To Stephanie's family and friends, and to the staff and students at G. Stanley Hall, the Board of Education would like to offer our sincere and deepest condolences. All right, thank you very much. All right, before we start with our regular agenda, we have the American Civics Curriculum hearing, so we will start that now, and I would like to call that to order with the Pledge of Allegiance. Everyone, please rise. All right, thank you. Roll call, please.
Here. Here.
Here.
Here.
Here.
Thank you. I'd like to call everyone's attention to the Open Meetings Law, which is posted at the entrance to the room. All right, thank you. We have a American Civics Curriculum hearing, and Ms. Siri?
All right. Good evening, Board of Education. Tonight is our annual American Civics meeting, where we give you an update of what's in the curriculum cycle, and this year it happens to be social studies. And so I'm going to give you just some general information, and then we will, well, maybe I am. Okay, there we go. So you may recognize this. This is one of your documents that we have for curriculum. As you may or may not recall, a couple of years ago, State Statute 79-724 outlined specific requirements for the American Civics Subcommittee. As part of that requirement by law, there is a requirement that there be a minimum of 2 committee meetings focusing on curriculum, which we have easily, and at one of those it be open for public comment. So that's what's happening here tonight, and I'm just going to give you a little bit of update on where we are as far as the curriculum development piece with social studies. So in 2019, the State Board of Education with the Nebraska Department of Education adopted new social studies standards. And what you see in front of you here is the visual that they use to represent those standards, with each of the domains for the standards being outlined. To the right is the mission statement that the State Board wrote that identifies the core purpose of those standards. It also outlines the purpose behind the social studies standards, and it's captured here in 3 very basic statements. You'll notice that the first thing is that students, every grade level, has each of those domains identified that the standards are written around. That includes civics, economics, geography, and history. Along with that, the end goal is that students will be engaged and informed as thoughtful citizens. And then the last one is that they will develop actions and dispositions to fulfill civic rights and responsibilities beyond their educational journey. So the standards overview as a holistic document, obviously the standards are written. They are put together in 2 bands, K-8 and 9-12. The K-8 standards are identified by grade level. And again, like I said earlier, each of the standards are written around the 4 disciplines. And then the high school standards are written in 1 band, and that's 9-12. And the purpose behind that is because each district can make a determination at what grade level they would like to offer which class. All of it being deemed to be completed by graduation. So for example, a district could offer government at 11th or 12th grade. Zooming in on the document that was at the beginning, you'll see on the left-hand side is the language directly from the law, and the right-hand side is the actionable steps by the district. We currently are in that renewal cycle with social studies. Every time our state board updates the standards and adopts them, then the next couple of years, we make sure that we align with those state standards that have been adopted by you, the Board of Education. So where are we at currently? Overall, the secondary teams are at the assessment writing stage. We actually have a couple of courses that are completely through. They have outlined and identified and aligned with the Nebraska state standards. They have selected resources, and now they are at that implementation piece. So it's exciting, and we'll be at full implementation next year. Elementary, teachers are on their second pilot of resources. They have also aligned with the Nebraska state standards and identified their learner outcomes, and they will also be at full implementation next year as well for social studies K-6. So here what I have captured for you are the courses for our social studies identified for Papillion La Vista Community Schools. You'll notice on the left-hand side it's by grade level, with each of the domains of the standards have been written in or identified. And then the right side obviously is the secondary, and really no big changes there. We're still offering the same main topics of courses. They've just all been aligned to the new state standards. Government is broken out as outlined by the state law for American Civics, so you can see there are 5 units there. And then the only change as far as class or course offerings is you will notice that through the toolbox cycle with the help and the work of the teachers, we had to identify a course that we would eliminate from the elective piece. That course you'll see that's outlined there is issues in geography in the modern world. We did that because with the new state law requirement of each student needing to take personal finance, we needed to open up some sections in teacher availability. That course had the lowest participation as far as the elective classes. Psychology and sociology had a much higher interest number by our students, and medical ethics is only offered at the Health Academy, and that's a requirement as part of that program. So that's the only change to the actual course offerings in social studies. And with that, I conclude the update on the social studies curriculum development. The last piece I would share is just as a reminder, we talked about it at an earlier meeting, but last July we did do our parent preview as part of this curriculum cycle, where parents were invited in to look at resources that we were considering at that time for pilot. And we had about 34 parents participate in that. So, and that concludes my presentation on our social studies curriculum.
Thank you very much. Any questions or comments from the board?
I have a quick question. I went to that back in July. Now that it's set, will we have another one where parents can come in and view everything again?
Parents are always welcome to come in and view, and we've had a couple reach out and ask to see that. At the very end, at the end here in the spring, the subcommittee for curriculum and instruction will go through each piece, and then at that time, yes, it will all be made available to anyone that wants to see it. So,
Any other questions or comments? All right. Thank you very much. Appreciate your work. And I will adjourn our American Civics curriculum hearing at 6:10. And with that, I will call to order the Board of Education meeting for February 27th, 2023. We have all done the call to order, so move to number 2, communications. First up is our military advisory, and Nikki Nader. Get the honors tonight. Welcome.
Thank you. Colonel Cooley sends his excuses. He's out of town. He's flying back in right about now, actually. As always, thank you for allowing us to come to this forum and participate. We greatly appreciate your partnership. Also wanted to send a thank you out to Dr. Becky Myers and Mr. Andrew Bell. We really appreciated their participation in our kindergarten roundup we had the other week. As you all are probably aware, Month of Military Child is coming up in April. We're getting our program together for that, and you'll be receiving the details of that soon from our school liaison, Ms. Yanikoff. Other than that, the only other things going on base is that our new vice commander, Colonel Aaron Gray, he's temporarily in town getting requalified on his aircraft, so he will join us in June as we look towards Colonel Thompson leaving us. I think it's slated for the change of command, I think it's June 22nd. There'll be more details to follow on that, and that's when Colonel Howard will take her place as our new wing commander. And then Colonel Gray will be in the seat. The only other things we're working on right now, you may have heard we have 2 very large inspections coming up that has a lot of our focus. One is the beginning of May, and the other is right after 4th of July weekend. Good time to prepare, right? So the one in May is just a broad look at, how we would do our jobs if we deploy in wartime, and then the one in July is like programmatic, like one end to the other bookends of all the programs on base, following guidelines, regulation, laws, and things like that. So we're pretty focused on that right now. But other than that, that's all I have for the board, unless, of course, you have any questions for me.
Ms. Nader, thank you for being here as always, and give Colonel Cooley our regards. We know he's a very busy guy. No, we don't have an air show scheduled for this summer, but do we have any sense of what future summers may hold and potential hosting of air shows may look like?
Well, we're going to do a kind of combined air show with Lincoln, the Lincoln Guard, this summer, and I think that's August. We absolutely plan on having an air show at Offutt the summer of 24. I mean, date to be determined. As you may or may not know, those dates are often determined on which aerial team you get, Thunderbirds or Blue Angels, and which week, their schedules allow. So, but we're definitely having one way or the other. We can all look forward to. So, okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, item B it's now public comment for items not on the agenda. For those of you who are new or need a reminder of this, when you're called upon by me, you will proceed to the podium and state your name and address. For the record for us, you will not exceed 3 minutes per person, and the total time for all individuals who want to speak shall not exceed 30 minutes unless a majority vote of the board approves extending the allotted time. At this time, we have 10 folks slated to speak. My plan is to be able to get through all 10 of those at 3 minutes each. I guess I should say that Ms. Branca will have the timer for me. If there is a lot of commotion, applause, jeering, whatever in between, then I will start cutting these down because I'm going to take 30 minutes. So please remember the decorum rules that we have as part of the board as you sit out there. So, all right. With that, first up is Ms. Lowen Eby.
Hello, my name is Lowen Eby, and I reside at 1401 Edgewater Circle, Papillion, Nebraska, 68046. Our district is paying Ms. Iman, Dr. Rickley, and Ms. Fisher to be presenters and co-presenters respectfully at the NSBA 2023 Orlando Conference, the Conference for Public Education Leaders. The workshop description they will present on a national stage is as follows: weathering the storm through effective communication. Mass, CRT, COVID, and library books were just a few of the topics that suddenly swarmed board meetings of this suburban school district in Nebraska. Mass protests, public comment, social media, and public records requests were some of the tactics the anti-Papillion La Vista Community Schools Group used to attempt to disrupt operations. Find out how PLCS used best practices to effective communication and community engagement to weather the storm. From Nebraska Revised Statute 79-724, the youth in our state should be committed to the ideals and values of our country's democracy and the constitutional republic established by the people. Ms. Iman, Dr. Rickley, and Ms. Fisher, mass protests, public comment, social media, and public records requests are not tactics. However, are rights enumerated in the United States Constitution and the Nebraska Constitution, as well as open government laws in the state of Nebraska. If you are referring to all of us that exercised our constitutional rights and followed Nebraska statute as anti-Papillion La Vista Community Schools, I am here to tell you I am proud to be a part of who you call anti-PLCS, because I believe I am setting an example for our youth. I love our country, I love our state, and I love Papillion La Vista Community Schools. I am not anti-PLCS, I am pro-PLCS. Thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening.
Next up will be Robbie Adams.
My name is Robbie Adams, and I live at 2007 Liberty Lane in Papillion, 68133. My comments are about the constitutional right to free speech as a parent and a grandparent. It's a sad day for the Papillion La Vista Community Schools Board. It's sad because one of your bosses, me, has to attend to remind you, the board, who serves me and are my representatives, that I am your boss, you are my public servants. As your boss, I have the responsibility to oversee your actions, policies, and attitudes. Whether I disagree or agree with you, I have the privilege of free speech before you. It's a sad day because I have learned that you denigrate my right to speak freely before you, so much so that you are taking steps to not only shut down my constitutional right, but even want to parade your insubordination of your bosses, we the people, before a national meeting of other representative school boards. Your presentation seeks to nationalize an impertinent, immature response to parents and grandparents, to other school boards across the nation, simply because parents and grandparents disagree with your policies and actions. Free speech is protected rightly in the U.S. Constitution. William O. Douglas, an Associate Justice of the United States Supreme Court, once said, "Restriction of free thought and free speech is the most dangerous of all subversions. It is the one un-American act that most easily could defeat us." How can you sit before we the people and our children and grandchildren, subverting the very constitutional rights that you should not only uphold, but preserve, honor, and help to teach to our young, in order to preserve this government of, by, and for the people? I urge you to cancel your presentation before the National School Board Association. Apologize to us, your bosses, and change course to uphold the Constitution and your responsibilities as representatives of all the people in this district. Election Day is not all that distant, and we parents and grandparents vow to remember this sad, sad day where we reminded you of your duty and the free speech that you seek to destroy. Thank you.
All right, next up is Mr. Edward Weniger.
Edward Weniger, 1709 Ridgeview Drive. I find it ironic that we just talked about American civics, and we later have a curriculum on a committee on curriculum and Americanism later on, and yet we are here to speak about mass protests, public comments, social media, and public records requests, all covered under the First Amendment. I request that the board, at a minimum, holds a vote on whether we should spend money on the actual purpose of traveling to Florida, and that is to speak before a bunch of educators on this topic. I want to just highlight one of the items on your list, that being COVID. I printed off two pieces of paper for you. The first is an article recently from the Lancet, a very well-respected journal, talking about how natural immunity is if the same, if not more effective than the vaccine. And my questions in regards to that are, one, are we going to have any more vaccine clinics for COVID? Why or why not? And then two, what are you going to tell the parents when a high schooler has a heart attack on the soccer field because of a shot that you gave them at the Papillion La Vista School's vaccine clinic? You need dissenting voices. We need open dialogue. Saying something you disagree with does not make a person anti-PLCS. Neither does an open records request, as these shady dealings with the conference demonstrate. You potentially gave a dangerous, experimental, and likely poisonous drugs to kids. You should go to Florida and tell them it's not anti-PLCS, it's pro-kids.
Next up will be Tracy Baker.
Thank you for allowing me to be here. My name is Tracy Baker, 7806 North 157th Street, Bennington, 68007. The Nebraska Association of School Boards cut ties with the NASBA in 2022 after their horribly offensive written remarks to the Biden administration that frustrated parents be classified as, quote, equivalent to a form of domestic terrorism and hate crimes. It is wretched to feel that we are living in a world that when concerned parents who are frustrated by repeatedly coming to school board meetings with current concerns regarding harmful protocols, anti-American curriculum, and school overreach, rather than being met with open discussion and meeting of the minds, we are met with blank stares and silence. So then we utilize the means given to us via the First Amendment and the Freedom of Information Act, and you decide to call these parents anti-Papillion. I cannot speak for other parents, but I can say for myself, I certainly do not attend school board meetings for the fun of it. I attend because I love kids, I love my district, and I want them provided the best education they can get via my tax dollars. I am not quite understanding why the Papillion School District is utilizing taxpayers' fund to send the board members to a conference held by a group that our state board association is no longer a member of. Rather than spending the time and energy creating slides and a breakout session to bash on what you call anti-Papillion parents and apparently equip them with, quote, specific communication and community engagement strategies, how about you do that with your constituents? None of you would engage with Mrs. Eby 2 weeks ago, and with the exception of Mrs. Holtmeyer, what are you afraid of? I would love to know what your community engagement strategies are, because I do not see any of you utilizing them by any of you, again, with the exception of Mrs. Holtmeyer. Quite possibly, instead of teaching others your, quote, expertise in parental communications, you should be utilizing these skills here at home. Perhaps one way to start that would be have an open Q&A session with parents within your school district. Thank you.
Next up is Amy Solita.
Hello, I'm Amy Saleda, 6324 Ponderosa Drive. I was going to start off with reading the clip, but I think you've got the gist of the clip we're all talking about. My question is, what PLCS community schools group are you referring to? And who exactly are you labeling as anti-Papio La Vista? First of all, these are public meetings for citizens to bring up legitimate questions, comments, and concerns regarding this district. I, for one, had grown to love this community, which was why I had chosen this district to raise my 3 children. I also don't see the problem with citizens viewing records and making FOIA requests. It's well within their constitutional rights. If you have nothing to hide, then you shouldn't have any reason to be worried. And if you ask me, honestly, I'd say this Papio La Vista School Board and District have become anti-parent over the last couple years. As the COVID crisis started developing, many parents had questions and concerns coming to mind. As time progressed and more parents with concerns started showing up, you felt it was more appropriate to start having law enforcement here at every meeting. There was no need for that. No violence or harassment had occurred. I do have to mention, though, how ridiculous I thought it was when Dr. DeFoy was here and he made a claim on Luann Eby on June 27th of 22, saying that her actions are nothing more than harassment. Why? Because she wanted answers to her questions? Parents have not been receiving good communication, period. I'm sorry if you haven't liked this part of your job, but issues can't just be ignored, which was probably the contributing factor that got Dr. DeFoy out of here and replaced with someone who actually listens and pays attention to parents. Here's some more examples of the fine communication from the staff in your district. How about September 1st, 2021, when the principal of Papio La Vista High School felt it was okay to force 2 of my children off school property and across the street, then left them alone, just because they didn't wear masks. Then he waited over an hour to notify us. Everyone knew we didn't live in the district. The principal laughed on the phone while admitting this to me. The previous day, the kids were kicked out again, and nobody ever told us. And even the day before that, Monday, August 30th, my kids were kicked out before 8 a.m. Nearly 3 hours later, an assistant principal called to tell me, your 2 students are currently in class and they're cooperating with their masks. They were actually sitting in my back seat, hearing the conversation on the car speaker. When I began speaking about this matter to her, she suddenly acted as if we had a bad connection and she hung up on me. When I attempted to speak to the principal in person about this matter, he insisted we walk outside and talk. Except once we got outside, he beelined back inside and shut the doors on me. What upset and scared me even more was that all of this happened just 6 months after Ryan Larson went missing, after staff was negligent and left him outside because of his behavior issues. Ryan Larson is an IEP for his autism. That should have never happened. One of my 2 kids that was forced off the property and abandoned was also an IEP student. And this is why I pulled my students from here. It was made very clear to me that staff and members of this district could care less about what parents have to say. Hence my belief that PLCS members have become very anti-parent. If you want effective communication, stop ignoring the legitimate concerns from parents who chose to trust you with our children's lives and futures.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Next up is Patricia Conway Boyd.
I'm Patricia Conway Boyd, live at 1004 West Centennial Road here in Papillion. I really try to stay away, but your actions bring me back. When I read that our superintendent, communications director, and one of our board members was going to a national conference and refer to the Papillion-La Vista public who participate in the democratic process as anti-PLC, it broke my heart. Because where this district has come. I have been part of this community for 42 years. 12 of those years I sat on this school board. In all that time, I have never encountered or spoken to someone in this school district that I would label as anti-PLC. Though we may have different views on what is best for the school district, I believe that all the people I have ever encountered in this district have the best interest of Papillion-La Vista. Our leadership will speak about their weathered storms against COVID and mass and CRT and books in the library. Our leadership suggests that they are innocent bystanders in the creation of these storms that they speak of, and that voters and taxpayers are to blame for the storms. The public does not make decisions. They simply ask questions and seek answers and voice concerns utilizing the avenues that are made available to them. Our leadership makes decisions regarding mask wearing and COVID protocols and the materials that are on our libraries. The public simply asks questions and seeks answers. This would be equivalent to blaming the journalists for the scandal because they asked questions about the incident. If there have been storms, our leadership contributed in creating those storms with the decisions that they made and the manner in which they dealt with the public. Our leadership presents that they weathered these so-called storms with effective communication. Effective communication involves transparency and absolute truth. In my experience over the last several years, our leadership has exercised selective communication, not effective communication. Our board sits silent when the public asks questions. This certainly communicates something to the public, but it does not answer their questions or addresses their concerns. Trying to control the narrative by sitting silent and strategic language is not effective communication. There are so many dedicated people in our district doing wonderful things for students every day, but our leadership has decided to take a national stage and present a program that refers to their public as anti-PLCS. We have so much to celebrate and share with the world. I cannot believe that our leadership has decided to put on a program on a national stage in which they whine about their public and call them anti-PLCS. Leadership is relatively simple. Make thoughtful, reasonable decisions for students and taxpayers. Be transparent, totally truthful when asked about those decisions. And when errors are made, you take that responsibility, fix the problem immediately, and assure that the error will never occur again. After seeing this program and the language our leadership uses to describe the voters and taxpayers, I fear that our leadership may want this public to just give them their money and their children and go away. This may be a time for some internal reflection rather than finger pointing at your public. Patricia Conway, citizen, voter, taxpayer, but never anti-PLCS.
All right, next is Kathy Foucher. Hope I'm saying that right.
Good evening. My name is Kathy Fauché. I reside at 7948 North 152nd Avenue. It is my understanding that an individual made a public records request for the presentation and meeting notes of the NSBA conference in April and has not been provided with that information. It is also my understanding that citizens' questions about the content of this presentation has not been answered by members of this board. I find it ironic that some members of the school board planned in secret a conference session to denigrate parents, and the theme of this session is effective communication. I was looking through the conference agenda and I noted there are numerous sessions on diversity, equity, and inclusion. The Papillion-led session, however, demonstrates how anti-diversity and anti-inclusion Papillion really is. It does not welcome diversity of thought and parental input, as demonstrated in the language used to describe the conference session. Calling a public records request a tactic when it is the legal right of a citizen to obtain information from a school exposes the fascist mentality of public education today. I call on this board to reconsider your plans at the NSBA conference, or revise the content to be inclusive of all opinions of the board, to highlight how school boards have failed taxpayers and what they can do to better serve communities such as Papillion La Vista. Thank you.
All right, next is Melissa, is it Helsel?
Yes, it's Melissa Helsel, 12013 South 113th, Papillion, 68046. Something of concern has recently been brought to my attention. On April 1st through the 3rd, members of the PLCS School Board will be using taxpayer dollars to attend the NSBA conference in Orlando, Florida. This is the same organization that labeled parents domestic terrorists. Not only will the board be attending this conference, representatives from the district will be hosting a breakout session called Weathering the Storm Through Effective Communication. The description of this session states that, and I quote, Most protests, public comment, social media, and public records requests were some of the tactics the anti-Papillion La Vista Community Schools Group used to attempt to disrupt operations. Let's take a moment to unpack that statement, starting with the anti-Papillion La Vista Community Schools Group. Now, that's a really long way of saying parents and taxpayers. Mass protests, public comments, social media, and public records requests were some of the tactics. Those sound like legal ways to exercise your First Amendment rights, doesn't it? To attempt to disrupt operations. You mean operations supported by taxpayer funds? Let's call this what it is. Parents and taxpayers used their First Amendment rights to voice concerns they had with the school district. They did so under the belief that their voices would be heard and their concerns would be taken under review. Instead, you ignored them. And according to this session description, you came up with your own tactics to silence them. You even denied legal documents such as religious affidavits violating the Nebraska and U.S. Constitution, which you swore to uphold. But it didn't stop there. Now you're using their tax dollars to attend a conference put on by an organization that labeled them domestic terrorists and hosting a breakout session to show other school boards how you successfully ignored the voters that you serve. Sound right? I'm here today to tell you I take this personal. Mine was one of the affidavits your school district denied. Mine and my child's religious freedoms were cast aside for the enforcement of a mass that had no science to back up its legitimacy. I also use social media to share my concerns and discontentment. Tell me, does that make me anti-Papillion La Vista Community Schools? My children go to PLCS. Does this label mean my advocacy for them will continue to go unheard? I want to make this clear. I do not support your use of my hard-earned tax dollars for this conference. And in fact, your decision to mock me and others like me on a national level is shameful. One thing I think we can all agree on is that your job on this school board is to do what is best for the children of this district. Listening and addressing concerns from their parents and legal guardians is part of that, not labeling them and painting them as the villain. I hope when you go home tonight, you'll ask yourselves, is this really how I want to represent my district and the people I serve? Thank you.
All right, next is Jim Mowdry, and I apologize if I'm not saying these right.
Good evening. My name is Jim Mowdry, close enough, 1207 Rebecca Court in Bellevue. Weathering a storm, you guys have started a storm. Calling your concerned parents, whose only concern was for the safety and well-being and education of their children, as anti-PLCS is atrocious. These parents exercise their First Amendment rights to speak up, use legal means to do so, and their concern was for the safety of their kids. They didn't drink the Kool-Aid, but looked at actual science, actual facts, to understand that the vaccines were worthless, masks were basically worthless and actually harmful rather than helpful. And to go on a national stage to denigrate these parents, again, you should be ashamed of yourselves. Tactics are what you are using. I would ask you to reconsider this, and at the very least, put this on an agenda for your next public meeting so that it can be discussed. I understand the Open Meetings Act, makes it so that you can't respond to things that aren't on the agenda. We'll put it on the agenda, and we can have a dialogue. Thank you.
Next will be Ruth Bennett.
Hello, thank you, Board. My name is Ruth Bennett. I live at 1905 Crest Ridge Drive, Papillion 68133. As you can see, I'm a member of Moms for Liberty, but I'm speaking for myself. Our motto at Moms for Liberty is to be a joyful warrior, so I apologize because I haven't been joyful since the last board meeting, but I am a warrior. I am a warrior for my children who have been in this district for the last 11 years. How dare you label concerned parents as an anti-PLCS group? We are practicing our constitutional rights and engaging in public comments. I am not anti-PLCS. When I spoke, I actually thanked the board for being open in person beginning in August 2020 because that was very important to me. I have the ability to homeschool my children, and I have the funds to send them elsewhere if I chose to. I choose to send both my children here. Masking has always been ineffective, and most recently, the Cochrane study put a final nail in that coffin. Your best practice would be to apologize for masking our kids and disregarding concerned parents. Thank you.
All right, next up is item C, Superintendent's Report.
Thank you very much, Mr. No, we don't engage. Sorry. Thank you for being here, and thank you for raising your. Unless Skip, did we have something? I'm sorry. We don't accept comment from the audience, I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Bailey.
You turn those in after the meeting started, and we do not accept those after the meeting started. We state that clearly. They must be turned in prior to the start of the meeting, so you can bring them back and speak at the next meeting if you'd like to do that. Thank you. Superintendent's Report.
Thank you. And as always, if you have comments that you'd like to share with the board, please drop us an email, drop us a letter, make a phone call. We'd be happy to make sure it gets. Please stop. Let me finish. I didn't interrupt you. Thank you. Superintendent's Report. Thank you for all of you that are being here, though we may disagree on matters of substance. To have people show up and voice their opinions, even when we disagree, means a lot. So thank you for being here, as always. And for those of you that are watching on YouTube, we certainly appreciate your engagement with this board as well. Legislation continues to be something that this school board and that the district is continuing to monitor very closely. We've mentioned in previous board meetings that we developed a list of potential bills that this district is following. There's been over 800 that have been introduced since opening session that first week in January. No organization can track that many bills at once. So what we've tried to do for the board is to whittle it down to a more manageable list. And I believe Mr. Richards shared first draft of that with Buildings and Grounds and Finance on Friday, and we're going to share that also with the CIA subcommittee as well, which represents all 6 board members. We're continuing to do our weekly meetings with Tim Gay, who represents the district's interests, and we're continuing to do our periodic meetings with GNSA, which also advocates for the district, particularly when it comes to financial bills that impact budget. Also had the opportunity to visit a number of schools the last 2 weeks since the last board meeting. We've had some fun things going on in our schools. Parkview Heights just hosted its Wax Museum, which if you're not familiar with this concept, many of our schools do the Wax Museum where 4th and 5th grade students do speeches from famous historical figures. That's always fun. Also did a variety of liaison lunches the last couple of weeks. I suspect you'll hear from board members more on our liaison lunches. We also have a number of our leadership cohort candidates doing mock interviews, and Mr. Richards, Ms. Siri, and I, among others, were able to sit in on those. So if you're not familiar with our leadership cohort, it is a group of teachers that have expressed interest in leadership positions. In some cases, it means administration. In other cases, it means something different. But in any event, one of the capstone projects that we do with our leadership cohort is doing mock interviews to prepare the candidates for that next step in their career, whether it's an assistant principal, a department chair, something of that nature. And it was a chance to see, frankly, all of the talent that we have in our teaching ranks, not just in our leadership cohort, but beyond. The teachers are certainly what makes this district work. Building update, Mr. Richards and Mr. Ware provided the central office with a building update by midsummer. All of the work from 2018 bond will be completed. Some of our projects are significantly ahead of schedule. Some we're just finishing up punch list, including Monarch, but it's kind of gratifying to see the work on over 5 years of hard work coming to fruition. Read Across America Week. I know we have at least 1 or 2 board members participating in Read Across America Week. That is March 2nd through the 6th. All 16 of our elementary schools participate in that, if that is something that board members are interested in doing. Typically, it involves a principal inviting 1 or more board members to attend, read to a group of students. It's kind of a fun way to see our students in action and engage and give back to our schools and our community. Also wanted to finish with a couple of real positive articles that we saw recently. One, the PLCS Community Closet. It's something that's near and dear to my heart. We've talked about it in this boardroom a number of times. World Herald had some really good coverage of the ribbon cutting that we had with Cavalry Shadow Lake Church. And then just this morning in the Midland section, we had a section dedicated to the proposed bond, which we'll be talking about later. And before I conclude, we did have a number of public records requests. We've gotten in the habit every month of detailing public records requests. The month of January 2023, we had 3, one from Ryan Kaufman, one from the Omaha World Herald from Lauren Wagner, one from Lowen Eby. Of these requests, one required school attorney hours. It was 14 hours, 45 minutes of staff time. One request is still pending. $805.27 was charged for these requests in aggregate. I will have the next report for you at the end of the next month. And with that, Mr. Bailey, I would conclude my superintendent's comments.
All right, thank you very much. And next on the agenda are board reports.
I have, let's see here, a couple things. I attended a liaison lunch at Ashbury the week of the snow day, well, 2-3 weeks ago already, jeez. Yes, so I did that, and we listened and heard positives and then some concerns. One thing that they wanted to know was to clear up confusion, and I know Dr. Rickley said that he would talk to Ms. Settles about this, about the pay freezes and then the new people coming in, just to see where they would be at on that. And then some other things that they had shared was, let's see here, mental health. That was a huge talk with many of the teachers there, and especially for COVID kindergarteners, which are now second grade. Just a lot of emotional behavior is declining, behind on reading. A lot of their days are spent disciplining children rather than doing curriculum, and that's what they said, and they said, we'll get to the curriculum, but she has to deal with the children first. So that broke my heart. I did get to go out to Ashbury today, and I did a tour of the school. And I went into all the classrooms with Mr. Hall, so that was pretty cool to see. I went in on reading time and then math time, doing magic tricks with rectangles and squares. So that was pretty cool. And then another thing, I just wanted to bring this to attention out loud because parents, I do know, watch this. With the district app, I did have a parent reach out on the email. The district app, so the parent has locks on their children's phone and they have parental controls. But within the district app, you can go to shortcuts like Facebook, YouTube, and you can look up anything on those. So I know that she had reached out back in 2021, and Miss Chantel Green said that she would pass it along, but it's still up. I downloaded it myself and I did it myself, and she had put in her emails, type in big butts, and you'll see what I'm talking about. So, I mean, like, they can search anything, whether they have a parental control or not on the phone. The kids can still go out there and see that. So, if parents are watching, people in here, take it off the phone because that's dangerous. And then another thing that I have was the...
Clarify that a little bit, because
Oh, sorry.
We definitely want to do some follow-up on
Yes,
Ms. Fire, so
yes, I had a parent who sent me the emails. This was from 2021, but then she just noticed it again. So on the district app on your phone, how it has like the shortcuts to these destinations, I guess.
What destinations?
YouTube, Facebook.
like social media.
Yeah, social media,
Okay,
yes.
okay.
Thank you.
So whether the parent has a control on their child's phone, they can still access this through the district app.
Thank you for bringing that to our attention. So between Mr. Bingham, our technology director, and Ms. Siri, will let us do some follow-up, and we'll get back to you on that. That isn't something that I'd heard up to this point, so that's very helpful. Thank you for that, Ms.
Sure.
Holtmeyer.
Yes, you're welcome. Yes. Okay, so another thing that I have, this was just Regarding the approval for Ms. Iman to attend the NSBA conference, I personally would like to apologize for voting yes to approve the expenditure. Had I known that this presentation was going to be going on, calling members of the community anti-Papillion La Vista, I would have never voted yes. Therefore, I would like to rescind my yes vote for the expenditure and vote no. And I would like this statement recorded verbatim. So after the last meeting, I had went through myself. I read online the session that Dr. Rickley, Ms. Fisher, and Ms. Iman would be presenting on. I still do have many questions. I did hear back from Annette, which is why I know who are the presenters. So how did myself and others disrupt operations? I want to know the definition of anti. I want to know what tactics were used on the community, because some tactics that I can see has caused mental health delay or mental health issues, which is huge. It has caused loss of learning. Children are behind emotionally. This whole presentation, which you have submitted a proposal on, is everything that I have preached for the past 2 years and what I campaigned on. And as you know, I took this very personal, excuse me. Please. Thank you. As you know, I took this very personal last meeting, as I should have, and just as I had shared, I'm in that PLCS Parent for Liberty page. I held signs out front. I spoke on COVID, I spoke on vaccinations, masks, library books, pornographic library books. But this is not only about myself, an elected official now. This is about parents, taxpayers, teachers, students who you are speaking about, who also shared the same concerns as we had seen publicly and from public records request. And thankfully, we do live in America where we have constitutional rights, free speech rights, yet we were silenced. From board meetings being taken off of Facebook with comments, to then the board president threatening to turn off a speaker's microphone. We had students denied religious affidavits, where in Iowa their district was handing them out. Ms. Iman, who at our Buildings and Grounds Finance meeting Friday, when we were going over the legislative bills, the Parent Bill of Rights, and she stated one thing our district is very good at is transparency. So good at transparency that at a meeting downtown, she had shook her head no when a presenter gave a scenario. If a child comes into your office and they say they want to be the opposite sex and go by pronouns, do you have to tell the parent? With a head shake. And then laughing when the presenter brought up, kids have smartphones, they know porn sites, but you have parents attending school board meetings complaining of books in the libraries. So in conclusion, I would like to see a copy of the submitted proposal and the final draft of the presentation in this broadcasted for all to see. And I would also like this presentation to be withdrawn from the NSBA conference. The district should not be using the taxpayers' dollars to present on this and speak about the same people that pay their salaries.
Any other comments, reports?
We attended the budget finance workshop with Mr. Madler, Ms. Fisher, and I did. It was a very good workshop. Learned a lot about financing in the district and tax dollars and how they come in. I attended a liaison lunch at Terra Heights. My grandson, who I'm a legal guardian for, was a student there, and so it was really a pleasure to see the teachers and reconnect. They all wanted to see pictures of him now that he's in 7th grade and 12 inches taller than he was when he attended school there. One of the first things we talked about was social emotional learning and how important that is to have that integrated into their classrooms. They even wish sometimes that they had more time, because sometimes the conversation gets very relevant for some of the students in the room, but they do integrate them into their lessons, and so I think that helps a lot. One of the examples was that the students have now a common language, so that if one student is dissatisfied with another student, like you're sitting too close, instead of pushing them, they say, could you please move over, you're into my space, instead of being violent or not violent, it's just being physical with them. So sometimes they wish they had more time with these concepts. We also talked about the bond issue coming up and how it will benefit their school. They're one of the schools that also needs to have the classrooms expanded and the hallways expanded, and they're looking forward to seeing what that final solution will look like for them. I think that was all we talked about mostly. Thank you.
Well, I was supposed to have a liaison lunch. Well, fun for the kids. They got a snow day instead. So Ms. Barinko's arranged. We've got that scheduled, rescheduled for later on in March. So, and for once the snow actually came. Just got to poke a little bit. Outside of that, I don't think. Yeah, outside of athletic events, that's all I have.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Next up are committee reports, buildings, grounds, and finance.
Yes, we met last Friday. We went again over some of the information regarding the future potential bond projects and one other agenda item on this evening. And did I miss? That was pretty much it. So.
Thank you. Human Resources and Student Services.
We have a meeting on March 9th, but we also have some items on the agenda for tonight, and there are quite a few coming up for our March 9th meeting, so looking forward to that.
And finally, Curriculum and Americanism.
We have not met.
All right, thank you very much. Next, we'll go into action items. We'll have a couple of comments for items on the agenda. The same rules apply with 3 minutes per individual. When I call you up to speak, please state your name and address. And what we'll do is I will address each item, and when I get to the item that you have comments on, then I will have you come up and comment on those on that item in particular. So first up for action items is action by consent.
I'll make a motion to approve the action by consent as presented.
Second.
All right, I had a motion by Ms. Fisher and a second by Mr. Madler. Any comments? Roll call, please.
Yes.
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 Thank you. Next up is board meeting minutes of February 13th, 2023. I do have public comments. Mr. Jim, I'm going to say it wrong again, Maudry. I think I got it right that time.
Yes, Jim Modry, 1207 Rebecca Court in Bellevue. Looking at the minutes, they're very detailed except one item, which was communication, just stating there was one public testifier that addressed the board, Ms. Lone Eby. Not even any mention of what she talked about. Could have just said regarding the proposed PLCS presentation at the NASB. So, just another example, I think, of lack of transparency. Any questions? Thank you.
I would just like to make a comment in response to that. These meetings are taped, and there's a taped transcription of the entire meeting with all comments made by everyone, whether it's someone who speaks from the public or someone on the board or one of the administrators. So that is all recorded verbatim on the recording, and those recordings are available and are posted, I believe, on our website as well, so people can go back and listen to those. I just wanted to make a notation of that.
Those are also kept up there for at least, is it how many months? Years, yeah. So they're up there, so.
I'll make the motion to approve the board meeting minutes of February 13th, 2023.
Second.
All right, a motion by Mr. Madler and a second by Mr. Lotus. Any further comments? The roll call, please. Yes.
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 All right, the third one is a resolution authorizing submission of school bonds at a special election. I do have I think this is where Mr. Keith, is it Thiessen or Thyssen? I'll say it the wrong way, I'm sure, but I think this is where you wanted to speak about the bond.
Yes, my name is Keith Thiessen. I live at 1902 Woodbridge Circle. I just had some comments on the bond issue.
There we go.
Okay. I've lived in Papillion for 30 years, and 4 kids have gone through the schools. We've had bond issue after bond issue after bond issue, and you always promise it's only going to go up $100 or it's not going to go up at all. One of those two things, every single time. Okay, so now we hit another one. I surmise that the $125 million, am I close on that? Okay, $130 million was come up with first, okay, because one came off and somehow with some financial trickery, okay, you guys came up with it, you know, we can come up with $130 million and it's not going to cost the taxpayer another nickel from what they're already paying. It should have been come up with, you know, some needs that are first. Okay, so I've got a couple comments on the needs. I suppose a new elementary school is important. Okay, I surmise that security glass for every single elementary school was put in there so parents at every single elementary school, because you always do it the same way, every single school gets a little bit of this, gets a little bit of that. And you're hoping, and it's worked. It's a secret formula here in Nebraska. Okay, 50%. If we're in Iowa, it's 60%, you know, and then you have a little tougher time at 60%. Okay, so we have security at all the elementaries for drive-bys. When's the last drive-by shooting that we had at an elementary school? I mean, that's my opinion on it. Okay, the last thing I'd like to comment on is the field house. Okay, from what I've heard in the neighborhood is that the administration at Papillion South tricked you guys. Okay, you gave them a blank check. They could do anything with it that they wanted. Whoa, you got some boosters, you got athletics, you got some rich people out there, okay, and they came up with a field house. Okay, which other school in Nebraska has a field house? Does any OPS school have a field house? Does Millard have a field house? Does Westside have a field house? Is there a field house any place in Denver? Is there one at some school in Kansas City? There isn't. Okay, but now, supposedly, because South has a field house, you think you have to put one at the other high school. We share stadiums. We share swimming pools. We can surely share a field house. Come on. Just, you know, get creative. Tell South that, you know, half the time is for the other high school. And make them live with it.
Thank you very much. That's 3 minutes. I appreciate it.
Are any of you listening to me? I just want to know.
Absolutely.
Okay, that's all. Thank you very much.
All right, Mr. Richards.
All right, good evening, Board of Education. We're here following up on our last meeting submission for bonds and special election. I'd like to introduce Mr. Tyler Mullen, Baird Home, who's an attorney for our bond counsel, and then Cody Wickham from D.A. Davidson's back, our underwriting services for the district as well, if they wouldn't mind coming up to the front in case we have any questions.
Ms. Renate, please sit down.
No, I put in my thing to speak on the bond proposal.
And you put it in after we started the meeting.
No, I did not.
Yes, you did. That we do not start that.
The official board meeting had not started.
started our meeting, and it was after that, you can speak about it next time.
Welcome, gentlemen.
Sorry, I saw him at lunch today. He's on the background. It's a good comparison. Thank you, Dr. Rickley, and board members. Cody Wickham with D.A. Davidson, 450 Regency Parkway. I'd like to introduce you to Tyler Mullen, as Brett suggested.
Yep, Tyler Mullen with Barrett Home Law Firm, bond counsel for the district, 1700 Farnham Street in Omaha.
Really, we don't have anything formal to present to you all. I think we kind of went through the language 2 weeks ago at the meeting. Just wanted to reiterate that the language that's proposed, the idea is to have it be thorough enough that the voters, when they receive their ballot in the mail, understand what they're voting on, but also make sure that the language is all-encompassing for all of the types of projects that the district is looking at. We made a couple slight tweaks to what was presented 2 weeks ago, and that's what you have in front of you tonight. The resolution, we have a couple copies for signatures should this move forward, and we just wanted to be here in case you have any questions of us.
Yeah, thank you guys very much for coming. We appreciate it. The resolution does include what you see on the slides here, what we talked about the last meeting. With the improvements for safety and security, as Mr. Madler had brought up, I think that was a good point on the ballot language last time. This is for $129,900,000 in bond proceeds is the amount requested for the final list of projects. Ballot language is also included in the resolution from the attorneys. Final project list, safety and security improvements at all schools will include the additional access control throughout the school, plus door propping alert systems, update intercom paging systems throughout the schools, update front entrance video systems, integration of all systems, bullet-resistant films at various locations, expanded chain link fencing around the perimeter of elementary schools. Parkview, Terra, and Trumbull, expansion of smaller classrooms by adding additional classrooms on the outside of the buildings, interior renovations, infrastructure improvements, including HVAC roofs and windows where needed, playground updates with rubber resurfacing. Hickory, Walnut, Portal, Patriot, and Bell, we have those safety and security improvements we talked about, finishing kitchen expansion, front entrance reconfiguration through the offices, interior updates, including tile, carpet, lighting, and then any infrastructure improvements that are needed at this time. Bell does have the finishing kitchen, and Hickory Hill is also included in all the interior renovations we talked about in the last school. Papillion, La Vista Middle Schools, science room renovation, reconfigure learning center space, additional counseling center at LVMS, interior renovations there, infrastructure improvements, HVAC roofs, windows were needed, and then the track and stadium updates as well at the two middle schools. Papillion La Vista and Papillion La Vista South High Schools, renovation of the fine arts auditoriums, flex classroom space at Titan, PE activity turf space at Monarch, and then improvements in turf for baseball and softball complexes for both high schools. Technology, supporting the increased demand on computer usage within our district-wide in the classroom, increased speed and reliability of computer connections at all schools, increased capacity of fiber connections, additional infrastructure for safety and security package. And then the Young Adult Transition Program building, that's for 18 to 21-year-olds with special needs. Currently releasing that building and having to outsource some services due to growth. We'd like to put that building possibly west of Liberty Middle School on district-owned land. And then the final projects would be the new elementary school and then looking to acquire some land for an additional middle school site in the future and one additional elementary school site in the future. Kind of looking through the ballot language that are in your packets, and we just want to bring that up on the screen as well. What would be the final ballot language that we would submit to the Sarpy County? If there's any questions or comments on that from the last meeting. Kind of the second part of that. And then questions for these gentlemen or myself as we look to finalize going to a bond election here in May.
No, I just wanted to clarify, I don't think the gentleman stayed, but I've been on buildings and grounds the entire time. We've been discussing this before it came before the full board, and we did not just back into that number. We actually could have spent probably 30 to 60 million more and kept the levy steady, given the bond market and given some of the restructurings we've had. So we did have some scenarios where we could have added additional projects. We just did not feel that any additional was necessary. So just to clarify that. And once again, this is just to authorize 129.9 million in bonds. Again, if things change and other things happen, costs spike, things, again, we don't go out for all 129.9 million all at once. This is just an authorization to issue some bonds when we feel we have projects that need to get started or done.
To Mr. Lotus's point, when we put that list together, and it did start with the list of projects, not the number. In the 10 years I've been here, we've never started with a number and just started backing projects in. That's not the way we do business here. The initial list was hovering between 100 and 110 million because we were motivated at the time to keep it below the last bond, the 2018 bond, which was 109.9 million. Unfortunately, because of forces outside of our control and inflationary pressures, projects that hypothetically cost 7 million now cost 8 or 9 million or more. So it put a tremendous amount of pressure on that number. But to Mr. Lotus's point, I believe Cody brought up at the last meeting, given the debt we're retiring, we could have authorized, this board could have chosen to authorize a much greater number than 130 million, and they chose not to. So that tax rate would stay the same. Very important, the tax rate is staying the same, which is not the same as saying your taxes will remain the same. We all know that. If your house increases in value, something that the district has no control over, by the way, but if your assessed valuation goes up and the tax rate stays the same, your taxes will go up. I want to be crystal clear about that because I think sometimes our constituents and our taxpayers don't quite see the difference between a tax rate and their actual tax bill. There is a difference. So thank you for that point, Mr. Lotus.
And I'll also add on, we did start with the smaller number. I mean, when we first talked about this over a year ago and before you guys went out and talked to the individual schools and the staff of those schools, can you talk through just some of the projects that were added after talking to the staff at the schools and maybe why then that number grew a little bit?
Yes. Oh, yeah, that's correct. I think we added the fencing around the elementary playgrounds for safety. I think that was a big one that we heard. I added the YATP building. That was one thing we heard from the different staffs out there as far as the need. So those were added along the way of the process that began well over a year ago. Getting out to the community, getting out to the different staffs and stakeholders within the community.
I think it would be fair to say, Mr. Madler, that the growth projects probably stayed the same or actually went backwards slightly. At one point, we had some preliminary conversations with the board about potentially 2 new elementary buildings. But after looking at the enrollment projections for the next 5 years, we determined that 1 new elementary would be sufficient to cover the enrollment. So that's one adjustment per your question. And I think the other point to Mr. Richards was that we really tried to beef up the safety and security. And some of that was based on feedback we've received from the community, some of the feedback that we've received from our staff. But to be perfectly blunt, some of it's in response to what's happened in the last 12 to 18 months. We've seen 2 of the worst school shootings in our nation's history. We have to be responsive to that, and I think if we didn't respond with an emphasis on safety and security, we've missed an opportunity with our community to show them that we're paying attention and we care about safety for our kids and staff.
And also in response to the safety, the gentleman said something about drive-by shootings. No, we haven't had one, but guess what? I don't want to be the first school to have one and not be prepared for it. So I'm glad we're doing whatever we can to make sure our kiddos stay safe because that is a #1 priority for me. And I'm grateful to the technology department for finding a way to integrate all of that and make it the most efficient security process probably in the city, if not the state.
Brett, I had a couple quick questions. How much did we spend on the mailers for the bond? Do you have that? I think you had given that to us at the retreat, but I can't find it.
Yeah, I don't have that amount in front of me here.
Okay, and then the phone survey and data, how much was that altogether?
We paid one section of that at 14,000, and there's another section of 14,000 as well. So 28 total.
Okay. And then for the Vote Yes campaign, how do those materials get paid for?
That wouldn't be paid from our district. That would be a committee that would form outside of our district.
Okay.
That would create their own bank account and those types of things. We just focus on the getting information part
Okay.
out.
Okay, to them, so then that they can go out to the public.
What's that?
We get the information to them, so that way they can go out. I had never heard of the Vote Yes until the meeting, so I just had a question.
No, that's a completely separate campaign that would happen.
Okay.
We focus on voter information, so we're trying to get people the information that's on the ballot and the project list and rationale for why we're wanting to do what we want to do with that project list.
Okay, got it, that makes more sense.
But yeah, we don't tell people how to vote. We want them
Right.
to vote.
Right. Okay, thank you for that. And then for the 2018 bond, I think you had said that there was 1.2 million left in safety security, correct?
That's what it's trending towards, yes.
Okay, so then that just sits there while this new bond comes in?
Yeah, I mean, the board will have some choices later this spring as we close out some projects that we know are happening over in through the summer.
Okay.
And we'll be able to have more specific numbers at that particular time on if we want to try to pick up a few more alternates or pick up some safety things within that amount with some other schools that aren't listed in this particular bond, for example.
Okay.
Yeah, you'll have some choices to make when it comes summertime.
Okay, yeah, because I printed off the 2018 bond, because obviously I wasn't here for that. So just trying to get updated with all of that. And I mean, there is a lot of safety and security issues throughout all of the schools, which I feel like that's on every bond. Obviously, that's top priority. But I mean, if we still have 1-point-something million left in it, like, I feel like we need to be acting now, especially going to all of these forums and then the lunches. Their biggest thing is the fencing, which I completely agree with, because you just don't want a kid to wander or somebody to come in quick and grab a kid off the playground. So that was huge, which I'm all for. And then the walkie-talkies was a big deal as well, for at least the 2 liaison lunches that I had went to. Faster communication. And then I know the intercom was in the bond as well, in case something is happening on this side of the building and they can't run to the office. Like, this is just quick communication. So that, I feel like maybe we can get on that right now with the money that we do have. Just thinking ahead on how to do this whole money situation.
Yeah, those are some possibilities that we've discussed as a committee. We want to make sure we get done with the projects we have on paper right now.
Right.
To make sure we can do those first.
Okay.
Once we are for sure that money's going to be available, then we can start discussing some of that you're talking about for sure.
Okay. I've looked at the bonds historically. At the height of our growth that we are going out for bond issues, it's every 6 years. So 2000, 2016, 2012, and 2018. So now that our growth is slowly, it may even be plateaued, per the reader online, we're going out for a bond in only 5 years. I believe this bond is requested at this time because at this time our leadership can state that a vote will not increase taxes over what taxpayers are presently paying. If they wait past May for the bond, the public will get those tax dollars back in their pocket, and the leadership will no longer be able to state that the bond will not raise taxes. So I personally believe that the bond request is premature. So we have funds to pay for the immediate needs, like I was just explaining. We should ask for bonds when they are needed. If not, convince the public the need for the bond money, we should not receive it. Going out for a bond early because it's easier to convince public to give you money is inappropriate. I'm speaking ahead maybe. I cannot make a vote of a yes when the administration, and I had this obviously in here before I came, but Annette had given me transcripts. So I will just read it. So I cannot make a vote of yes when the administration has not provided me the information I had requested. I want to see still the 2018 bond of the completion list. And I believe we still have over the 1 million left in the safety and security. And I stated in here that I was asking right now for the 4th time for the transcript that was read for the phone survey. We were supposed to get that emailed, but I just had it on my desk when I came in tonight, and I obviously don't have time to read through the whole thing. So for me, I don't have enough information that I personally want to go ahead with this. I'm not comfortable with it, so I just wanted to share that.
Any other questions from?
Mr. Richards, just correct me if I'm wrong. When we talk about the levy, we are talking about what we're levying in terms of, and we're saying that as a bond issue is falling off and we're looking at a new bond, we're able to keep our levy steady or even decrease it, which we've often done when we've brought out a new bond issue. This doesn't correlate with a person's taxes being less, because we may set the levy for whatever it is we think it needs to be, the same or less, but then the county decides what the valuation is, or the assessed valuation is for property, and that's a piece that we don't have a part in, and we can't speak to what will happen there. We're only as a district talking about the levy and our ability to hold it steady or ability to take it down. And as far as I'm aware, we've not raised that levy, and there's no intent to do that with this bond issue either. As for timing of a bond issue, I don't remember ever as a board member talking about we're going to do a bond issue every so many years. It may have worked out that way, that's kind of occurred, but it's more been about when we have a need for things that need to happen, whatever that is. And the process that I'm aware of is that we always go out to the schools, we talk to them, we look at the schools, we look to see what needs there may be, whether that need is something big like an addition, or whether that need is a lot of interior renovations to make older classrooms be more comparative to newer classrooms in terms of size and accessibility, and some of the other things that might need to happen in our older buildings. So my understanding and my experience has always been, we start with that list, and then we come up with what that list might cost us, and then we go back and say, amongst the group, we think we can support that list, or there's some things we're still questioning or have some concerns about, and then we take it out to the public to see what the public feels about it, knowing that we may have to take some things off, we may add some things. I've been through this situation where we've added things to the bond, and we may have removed things from the bond after public feedback. So this is a long-standing process, but I've never seen it start with a dollar amount, and never seen it start with a specific year range that we're going to go out for a bond issue. So I just want to make that clear from my experience. That's what we've done. For me, we do spend some money asking the public, getting information out to the public, because it's our job as a district to inform the public of what we're looking at doing. We also spend some money doing a survey, because we know we don't reach everybody by people coming and attending, so we do the survey as well. All of this information together helps the district decide whether this is a good time, whether the projects are supported, and in this case, so far, that's what we've seen. So there's always some expense to that. However, the district's expense is only in about getting information out and getting feedback from constituents. This district does not sell a bond issue. That's not even allowable for the district to do. That's where another group in the community may step up and say, we want to help support you, and we're going to run a campaign, and that is separate from the district. So it's important that we're able to clarify for the patrons of the district, that is not something that we do. Our job is to inform and get the information out. So I just wanted to clarify so that, and if there's anything that I've said that's incorrect, please feel free to correct me, but that's my understanding and my knowledge.
Yes, that sounds exactly correct. And I think you see on the summary sheet how many meetings we've spent talking about it along the way over the last year, going through the process you just described.
I do think it's important to note, board members have to vote their conscience here. I would expect nothing less. But we need to be crystal clear that if we don't do these projects, I mean, if we do not authorize this bond, some very important things will be left by the wayside. There are residual dollars from 2018. Those residual bond dollars will not begin to touch the safety and security projects. Let me give you a concrete example. When we passed the 2018 bond, we did the controlled access entryway at several of our buildings because of construction limitations as well as trying to keep the overall tax bill at a reasonable level. We didn't do it at all of our buildings. We've got 5 buildings that will require extensive demolition and renovation. That's just the front entryway, to say nothing of the other things we've talked about, the fencing, the door locks, the sensors, the things that we know that are going to make a difference. Even if we used all of those residual 2018 bond dollars, it wouldn't begin to touch the front entryways alone. So we have some difficult decisions to make about safety and security, and all of us will be held accountable for that. And I just wanted to remind the board that safety, please don't interrupt, that we have some important decisions to make about safety and security and what we want this district to look like moving forward. Thank you.
I read most of my reasons last meeting for why I would support it, including that I think you've done your homework to make sure that those dollars are spent efficiently. And is this not true that once the bond is approved for the amount, does not mean that we are taking the bond out at once? We space it out over 5 years or whatever many years it takes. And if we don't need to do something, we won't take those bond dollars. So it's just a maximum cap of how much the district can release a bond for over the period of time that it's, okay. I know Ms. Holtmeyer mentioned how Parkview Elementary classrooms were small and the hallways were crowded. That's one of the schools that will benefit from this. I agree with that. If we don't get busy on that, that school will have to wait a lot longer. And that breaks my heart to see that we wouldn't do what we can do to help our schools to be the best that they can be. So I support the bond. I think you've done your homework. I think that we're doing the best we can for our taxpayers. I think we're being transparent as far as our work done on the bond and having forums and having meetings where everybody could have their input. And I think then after we get this resolution passed, then it will be up to the taxpayer who votes on whether or not we can have the bond.
Yeah, I echo that. I support this bond. You talked about Parkview, but we have the other, some of those other older elementary schools getting their larger classrooms, which would be great. Get them up to a more up-to-date standard as far as like what our new elementary schools are being built at, which I believe was also one of the items that we added after a lot of feedback from the teachers and the staff in those schools, just saying they don't have enough space to do the sort of teaching that they want to do with the children. And I think it would be, it would be frustrating if we couldn't get that through and get that for these older buildings, because those buildings, the staff, those children, the parents, they deserve as nice of schools as those newer ones being built. I just, because we're talking about it and discussing it, so I heard 2 reasons that maybe, Ms. Holtmeyer, you are against. One is timing. So what would the timing look like for you? Why now push back on the timing?
Well, I've said many times that there's stuff in the bond that I feel personally, and just from reading online from like the bond and the bond Facebook group and from people in my breakout rooms or whatever you call them at the high schools, what their concerns were, because I was there taking notes as I was just attending. There's a lot of stuff on here that does not have to be done within this whole bond frame. Now, I feel like, as I've expressed before, maybe we can take stuff off of here and then give the community a different price of a number. I've expressed that many times, actually, and I just want to clarify myself that I am not against safety and security, and I'm not against renovating these schools that need it, because walking through Parkview, like, that broke my heart, and seeing the tiny space that they had in the hallways because they had storage in it, and just hearing the principal and how much he loves his school and how little access that these kids have, and that's dangerous, for one. That's a fire hazard. So I'm not against that stuff. I'm against other stuff that is that is in here, and just like that gentleman had presented about.
Can you give some examples of what you're against? You keep saying other stuff.
Yeah, I am right now, just like that
Okay,
gentleman was
cool.
presenting, like the whole turf thing at the Monarchs. I mean, I was sitting in the crowd when this whole thing got brought up with public records requests. That's like when I first had come in, and then going back and looking at videos and reading public records requests for the whole Titan performance thing. And now this is on the bond list where essentially taxpayers are paying for a mistake that the board had made. And I say that because I have proof of it in a public records request that a policy was violated, and that a lady would be getting a promise on this upcoming bond within 3 years. Like, that's in a public records request, and then here it is right here. Like, that just doesn't settle well with me, to be fiscally responsible, me paying for a mistake that I did not make.
Is that the one? So there's a lot of stuff listed on here. That's one. Is that the only item?
I mean, to me, if we're doing a bond list, let's do the safety and security, because obviously going back and then reading through different updates that we've had, we had the football scoreboard, and I believe that was, we got something from Facebook maybe, and then we were going to go through the special buildings funds, and then at Papillion South for the backdrops, for the backstops for the softball and baseball fields, that was like $83,000. So if we have money, I'm not saying sports aren't important at all, because I come from a sports family, but I believe safety and security is just a little bit more ahead of that. So if we're spending money on that, like we spent money on a house, $278,000, like why? I know these safety and security issues did not just come up this past year. It's been going on for longer than that. So why haven't we taken control of that first? I mean, obviously I got a lot of questions, which is why I'm not comfortable on voting for this yet.
When we walked through the two high schools, did you have any concerns at that time about the equity that we were trying to achieve between the two buildings?
Say that again.
When we walked through the two high schools and we did the tour with the principals, and they showed us the areas in the room that would be added at both schools, did you have any concerns about equity then? Because that's what we were there to do, was to see if anything was needed, and I don't remember there being any questions.
No, I
at
did,
that time.
because I asked Mr. Ryan, the principal, I said, what are your needs? And the school that's getting this whole performance center, he stated safety and security. So yes, I was asking.
But he didn't say he didn't need the other room.
He also said he would like to have that space. He was talking to us about where it was, because I was on that tour. as
No,
well.
I'm not talking about the meeting space. I'm talking about
I'm not talking about the meeting
sport
space
facility.
either. I'm talking about the turf field.
Okay, but at the very end of our conversation, when we were standing by the doorway, I asked him, what are your wants versus a need? And he said safety and security.
And I agree with that 100%. And I think that that's why we have this bond. Is, again, we're not saying that we're going to put a sports, turf field in first or anything like that. We are saying we're going to authorize a bond to be able to cover all of these things, just like we do with.
And I
with the
understand,
other
but like I said, maybe there's some stuff on here that we can take off and wait till the next go around to do, or fundraise to do some of these expansions for the.
Well, we got, yeah.
Oh, you can't fundraise.
Buildings have to be in.
Yeah, and I mean, I will say, I think, it's just sitting here a little frustrated, because we've talked about this meeting after meeting after meeting. We've talked about it in buildings, grounds, and finance. We talked about the board retreat, and I don't remember getting specific things that you were against and not wanting on this bond until we get to the point where we have to approve the final bond list. Now we're getting pushback on, and that one is less than 1% of the total bond, I believe, the turf space, less than 1% of the proceeds, and we're talking about safety and security. Do we know how much it costs to put in, construct the safety vestibule at one elementary school?
I mean, I don't have that in front of me.
It's not a small number. It's not a small number, and we have to do it to multiple schools, which you don't set aside the building fund to handle those large renovation projects like this. The backstops were $600,000, I can't remember, between the two. What that we put in. I don't think the building fund is appropriate for these large items that we need to do. I mean, the expansion of the smaller classrooms at the old school, that's not a small project. That's not a small dollar project, tearing out walls and adding to those buildings. You're not going to be able to come up with those out of buildings,
Right.
Building budget, and you're not going to be able to do it out of your general funds.
Right,
So
but
you
we
talked
can-
about safety and security. Do you support the Parkview Terra and Trumbull, the expansion of the smaller classrooms, those things listed?
Yes, I do, but you're not understanding me. I have one, just as Brett had stated in the meeting Friday, you're not for the plot of land, which I'm not. There's things on here that I have said that we can we take off to make a bond number smaller? Like, I don't know how much clearer I need to get. And I am a person, when I'm in a meeting and I'm learning new information up front, I take it in and then I process and I take a lot of notes, always. And then I figure out what I'm going to say. I'm not just going to make a quick thing right there and then. And just as Dr. Rickley had stated, you vote with the conscious mind. Like, as of right now, that's what I'm doing. And I feel like I'm being attacked and persuaded to do differently.
I'm not meaning to attack. I'm just trying to understand, because we have talked about this list, I mean, over and over again. And we all ask questions. Can we make, and suggestions to these? So the question of, can this be smaller, to me, doesn't come across as, not supporting the final list of projects. So that's just what I'm trying to understand, because out of all the meetings, I just did not come to that conclusion that we don't have the full board support of this bond list. And to get to this point before, we find out, I'm just surprised.
Well, you shouldn't be surprised, because I have expressed things in here that I like the land and like how I wanted to take stuff off of here. I'm a new board member, then tell me what to do, because there's stuff on here that I don't feel like we as a public need right now. There are a lot more things, like the expansions of the smaller classrooms at these schools. Totally. The safety and security, yes. Can that be on a bond by itself and then come back to all this other stuff later? Like the fine arts, they need space. They are out of space. So just things like that.
So you say this now, and again, I'm not trying to attack, I'm trying to understand as well, because we spoke about this for a lot of time at the retreat on the 30th. Mm-hmm. And you did not raise any specific concerns then, even though we discussed a number of these things. So that's what we're trying to figure out, is why, I agree with Marcus, why did you wait until now to come up with a couple of these things? And, you've mentioned, the turf space, and now you've mentioned the additional land.
Well, then maybe I wasn't specific, but I had said at those meetings before, can we get rid of stuff on this list and break it down to smaller and then get the dollar amount down? Like, that retreat is recorded. I would love to listen to all 4 hours of it so I can make sure that I said that, because I know that I did.
Okay, I'm just looking for something other than stuff, like specific. That's what I think.
Right, but I
Marcus and I were trying to
just
get
shared
at.
that, and I also wanted these transcripts 4 times ago, so however many months ago that was, because I want to see what is being said to the people on the phone versus what their answers are showing, because just like Sue Ann had asked, is it an open-ended question? I want to know all details before I spend money, because I am a part of this, I'm a taxpayer.
Yes,
As well.
as we all are.
I understand that, but I'm just telling, I want to have my ducks in a row before I know what I'm doing, and that's what I'm trying to do.
Okay.
And just to clarify, again, the reason for the timing of this is need. As Marcus stated, we can't do a $8 million elementary school out of the building fund. If we did so, we'd raise taxes so high by levying that fund significantly. So we can do it, but you're going to raise taxes significantly without doing a bond. So that's the tough part about that building fund, is that, as Marcus stated, it is for those smaller projects that we specifically put money in that fund to do for immediate needs. We can address immediate needs with this bond by authorizing it and getting it out quickly for a vote. And if it is positive, then we can instantly go out to market and start prioritizing these projects.
Right, and I understand that. Do I think you can build a school or add on to a school with a special buildings fund? Probably not. But can you go out and get these teachers walkie-talkies that they need for their safety, for their student safety? I'm sure you can. We have an Apple MacBook thing coming up tonight. Like, let's get the walkie-talkies. I understand what you're saying, that we can't build a building with this special funds that we have, but we can do the little things. And like I said, because I know my words will get twisted around on some sort of a media, that I don't support any of this, because it's happened before. And that's not what I'm saying. I am saying perhaps we can take some stuff off of this, because I am in support of some of these listed on the project. Do we need it all? No. Were you listening to Facebook responders on the bond page? I don't think so. Did we really hear the people's concerns at these high school forums that we had? Because I know going to two of those and then an elementary school one, like there was concerns that people were sharing and they're not on here, which I do understand. I don't understand actually. Why? Because there's a lot of other issues that should be on here for this stuff.
Brittany, the data was presented in aggregate, where we saw all of the questions that were asked at all of those committees, and they were folded into those solutions. So every consideration was taken into the data collection that was provided to us.
Okay, but how come on Facebook, like, open...
Facebook is a social media.
It's the
data collection.
I understand, but it's the Facebook Papillion Lewis de Bond page where...
So is Liberty of Parents, whatever your group is called. We don't see that either.
Okay, I'm done.
Ms. Holtmeyer, I do understand you have some concerns about this bond issue, and you're coming late to it from a board perspective, absolutely. I will say I attended as well. I listened to what the public had to say, and then I wait to see all the data that comes together for me to make the decision. The one thing that I will say for me is that there wasn't anything that came across as a concern that we needed to take a step back from a public perspective to remove things from the bond issue. So I just want to clarify that that is part of what helps me make a decision about a bond issue. I do agree that there are things that we absolutely cannot do unless we do a bond issue. And there are things that we can do with our building fund sometimes. And as we've discussed, there is at this time, it appears there'll be some leftover money from the last bond issue. But we don't know that for sure because all the projects aren't completely finished yet. So until that's done, we don't know if we have funds available to do anything with. We'd have to wait to see. And then we can make choices from the alternate things that we had on that bond issue when we took it out to the public. Because again, as we've talked about, we can only spend the money from a bond on things that we had listed as potential possibilities. So I understand your concerns, absolutely. But I will say that through all the discussions that we've had, all the things that we've attended, all the information that's come back, I just feel pretty confident that the things that we have in this bond issue are overall supported. Now, are there some things that some people don't support? Absolutely. Are there sometimes you'll have things that one person would say do this and another person would say do that? Absolutely. We can never get 100%. We're just never going to get that. So for me personally, just like you have concerns, for me personally, I feel pretty confident with this and feel really comfortable about it. But I do appreciate your sharing your concerns about it, especially as you're coming to the board afterwards. What I would say is that it's more helpful for me as a board member if you can give more specifics, not just generalities, but more specifics. And I think you've done a little bit of that tonight. But for me, I'm ready to vote to support the projects because of the information that I've received. So that's just my take on it. So
I'll make the motion to approve the attached resolution as presented, authorizing submission to the qualified voters of the school district at a special election to be held on May 9th, 2023, a proposition relating to the issuance not to exceed $129,900,000 in general obligation bonds for the purpose of paying the costs of constructing additions, improvements, repairs, and renovations to new and existing schools and program facilities, including the construction of a new elementary school, providing for necessary furniture, equipment, technology, safety, and security updates for the same, constructing a new facility for the young adult transition program, and the acquisition and preparation of sites for future schools and program facilities with interest and principal of said bonds to be payable from a special levy of taxes against all taxable property in the school district.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, I have a motion from Mr. Madler. Hang on one second. And I have a second from Mr. Lotus. Any further comments?
Yes. Mr. Bailey, so with me not going through and reading all of the transcripts, and I'd like to see the 2018 completion list that we have had so far, can we table this until the following board meeting, March 13th, 2023, so I can read up on it?
No, I'm not inclined to table this. I'd like to take this before a vote.
And a motion and a second have been made. You have to take the vote.
Yep.
I will say this, Mr. Bailey, if it helps Ms. Holtmeyer, the vote needs to be taken, I agree. But Ms. Holtmeyer, if there's specific questions on the 2018 bond list about what's been done, what hasn't, I would be happy, Mr. Richards and I'd be happy and I to go through that. Likewise, regardless of the outcome of the vote that's about to happen, if there's specific questions within that list that you want to run by Mr. Richards and I, obviously we would be happy to set up a time to do that.
Any further comments? Roll call, please.
No, I just had a comment.
Oh, I'm
Just
sorry.
Quickly, again, no, I appreciate Buildings, Grounds, and Finance, even though you've only had a couple of meetings. Just thank you to that group, Mr. Richards and your team, for all the information, our partners helping us through the process to even get to this point to take a vote to propose a new bond. It's been a couple years in discussion, and I do appreciate the subcommittee and the board and all those involved to help us strategically plan the needs for the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years for this district. This district and this board in many, many years has had that task in a growing district, and we still are growing. There are neighborhoods being built right now and pockets that we need to address immediately, and things that we definitely have to move on to make sure that we're doing our job to retain, recruit the best teachers, to take care of our students, and hold our district to the high standard of excellence that we always have. And that started with the predecessors when I first got interested in the board when I was in high school doing that. Folks ahead of us, and Ms. Fisher being one of them that has been on this board for a long time, has taken that initiative, have done the due diligence, and tried to think thoughtfully and fiscally responsible to set ourselves up where we're not like other districts where we're having to come out with significant bonds or things, or we're behind and now we have desperate needs and we can't get a bond out to the public in time to address those needs. So again, a big thank you, and I look forward to the vote.
All right, thank you. Anything else? Okay, sorry about that. Didn't mean to interrupt you. Roll call now, please.
Yes.
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 How do I vote yes or no? I don't want to vote. Abstain.
Yes.
Yes. All right, thank you. That concludes our action items. We are now moving on to discussion and information items. Thank you very much, gentlemen. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Cody. Thank you, Tyler. Have a good evening.
Resolution for President and Secretary to sign.
All right, first up on our discussion information items, the Springfield Platteview boundary transfer. I think that is that Mr. Richards again?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Bailey. We have a request for a transfer of school boundary As part of an interlocal agreement that we did and with Springfield Platteview Schools back in December of 2015, as part of a resolution to help with the learning community being dismantled, I would say that'd be part of it. But PLCS receives boundary transfers of land from 60th Street to 128th Street, north of Cape Art Road, if a developer would like to pay a transfer fee to have it brought into the PLCS district. That transfer fee back in 2016 started at $2,000 an acre. It goes up 3% a year, so I'm not exactly sure what that's at this particular time for Springfield Platteview, but I think it's $2,600 and some dollars at this point. The districts have done several transfers over the last 7 years. Tonight's transfer request includes land from 72nd and Schramm Road area, just east of 72nd there. You can see on top of the hill, they're starting the building of that right now. Approximately 23.251 acres, which is in currently development for multifamily units. The SPCS Board of Education, Springfield Platteview, has already approved the request from the developer and brings it over to our district today. So if you kind of look at an area map there, you can see 72nd Street going north towards Schramm Road is where the property is located, up on top of a hill. If you drive by it, you can kind of see it being built up there as we speak. Any questions on that reorganization process? I know the information is in your packet on how that works. Basically, next steps would be, once the law states is both boards of education approve the transfer, and then it goes to the state reorganization committee in the spring. They don't have a lot of things happening right now with the state reorganization board, so they usually wait until they have some mergers of other districts or transfers of boundaries before they set a meeting. So I would anticipate they'll try to get one done here in April or May.
Any comments or any questions for Mr. Richards?
It's just discussion tonight, so if you come up with anything that you have any questions in the next couple of weeks, let me know, and I'll get the answer to you on that.
Fantastic. All right, thank you very much. Moving on to the next item for discussion, Policy 2000 Administration, and I think this is for you, Sue-Ann, correct?
Yes, Dr. Settles called me this afternoon and said that she's going to be out ill today and asked that I mention that we did have some suggestions that were submitted recently for the Policy 2000 series, and that the subcommittee will be reviewing those when we meet on March 9th and bring recommendations to a future board meeting.
All right, thank you very much. I'm just waiting. We good? Okay. Item C is the 2023 middle school staff technology purchase. And Lucas and Shireen and Brett, I guess all three of you tag team in this one.
Thanks. Good evening. In front of you is a discussion item for our staff purchase that's up this year. In 2017-18, we did a long-range technology planning process. The plan at that time was a 5-year plan, and it laid out an even longer range budgetary cycle for replacement and upkeep of not only staff devices, but many other technological items across the district. The next thing that's up prescribed by that plan is our middle school staff devices for our 3 middle school buildings. So we would anticipate bringing back a formal proposal for seeking board approval at our next board meeting in March. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
No questions from the superintendent's office, but would like to point out to the board and the community, Mr. Bingham just welcomed a new addition to the Bingham family and looks remarkably well rested, even though I think all of us around the room that have had newborns know that that simply isn't possible. But thanks, Doctor. On behalf of the board and administration, congratulations.
What happens to the old equipment?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we, as part of that plan, part of the strategy there, is we actually sell that equipment and use those residual funds. They go into our depreciation fund. The depreciation fund helps us sustain the cycle. So we typically go out for bid to resellers who specialize in that type of process. We don't necessarily sell it to the general public. Since simply there's a lot of things that has to happen. We have to make sure the data gets wiped properly, the machines are cleaned and prepped and ready. And so essentially whoever will give us the best price for the residual value of those machines, we'll work with. We'll sell them to that company. It's a company that would do that. And then we would be able to use those funds to help sustain the cycle going forward. Yeah.
I only have a comment. How is that accurate? A 3-week lead time?
Yeah, it's pretty good actually.
Yeah,
It's
that's
not,
phenomenal.
It's not too bad.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Yeah, that is.
We don't want to risk it. We don't want to
knock
jinx
on wood.
anything
I'm
here,
like,
but yeah, it's not too bad right now.
Yeah, wow.
We'll take it.
No, that's fantastic. That's good news.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
Thanks, Lucas.
All right, that concludes Section 4 for discussion and information items. Section 5 for the future board calendar. Coming up, March 1st, I will be doing a liaison lunch at La Vista Middle School. March 3rd, Mr. Madler will be doing a liaison lunch with Portal. And March 7th, Ms. Fisher will be doing a liaison lunch, and I'm going to screw up STAR. I cannot remember for the life of me what that stands for, but.
I don't know what it stands for.
Okay.
So you stumped the superintendent, so how about that?
All right. Okay,
Yeah,
you got me.
we call it YATP, Young Adult.
Okay, that's what.
Young Adult Transition Program.
Okay, good.
It's the STAR building at YATP, the Young Adult Transition Program.
Maybe that's it. Okay, good. Thank you. I sat there and thought I lost my mind. All right. March 13th through the 17th is spring break, so there'll be no school. And our next Board of Education meeting will be on that Monday of spring break, March 13th, 6 o'clock here in the central office. And seeing as there's nothing else on our agenda, I will adjourn this meeting at 7:56 p.m. Thank you very much.